Good morning.
Good morning.
Ken,
Yes, sir.
musicians, thank y'all so much for the music. For y'all that don't know me, my name is Tim Hall, and I'm a member and also secretary of the board of directors.
Yay. Yay. Great job.
We're so glad.
And I am also a veteran. At this time, I'd like to thank the board for every year during Veterans Day, they allow veterans to speak and talk about their experiences
Yes.
so that you can learn a little more about what we have gone through and what we have done.
Yes.
So that's greatly appreciative. 100 years ago today, and almost on the exact hour, the armistice between the United States, Allies, and Germany was signed. It was signed on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month. That war was a costly war, costing almost 37 million people their life. Over 11 million were civilians. And of that 11 million, 6 million died of starvation. This was a war to end all wars, as President Wilson said at the time. But unfortunately, as we know, that is not the case. It did not happen. We have continued to have wars and conflicts ever since. And men and women of this country have continued to serve, whether in peacetime or in war. And for that, we're very grateful. Who is a veteran? A veteran is an individual who served in the armed forces of the United States. As you look around the world, you'll find them as educators, police officers, EMTs, firemen, doctor, nurses, members of your city council, state legislatures, serving in the Congress of your country, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sons and daughters. Pretty much like anyone else you see in this country, except they took a portion of their life to serve in the defense of the country. Often willing to lay down their life if necessary. Now, Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day and was that until 1954 when the Congress changed it to Veterans Day, and that's what we celebrate at this time each year. We have several veterans that attend here, and I'm going to name them by name. They may not all be here. Jim Alexander,
Yes.
Jim Anderson, Scott McDowell, Paul Cunningham, Ken Dinkins, Linda Hall, Archie Moore, and a special guest of mine today, active duty member, Petty Officer First Class Matt Bird. Thank you for being here, Matt. If I missed anyone that served, please let me know so I can recognize you for your service. I myself served in the Navy for 26 years. I enlisted in the Naval Reserves in August of 1969 and transitioned to active duty in December of 1971 and retired from the Navy in 1995. Why did I enlist? It was 1969 and I was not going to college. And Ken can tell you what was going on during that period.
Yes.
If you did not list, you were going to be called. But the Army at that time was actively recruiting me for the aviation program to become a helicopter pilot and the warrant officer program. After researching the subject for a little while, I found out their survival rate was not so good. I had a friend that had enlisted in the Naval Reserve, and he told me, hey, they still got openings, they're looking for people. So I traveled down to NAS Dallas, sat down, filled out my forms, took my test, and they offered me a contract in aircraft maintenance. And so I took it. Went from there, went to boot camp, went to school to learn to be an aviation hydraulics mechanic. And from there, returned back to Naval Air Station in Dallas to start my reserve duty. I was assigned to a fighter squadron. And during that time in the fighter squadron, we did our monthly drill, which was every 2 days. I worked on the flight line and enjoyed it immensely. We went on our 2-week annual duty for training aboard USS John F. Kennedy CB-67. And I've got a coin from that, thanks to Jody. And during that duty, I worked on the flight deck. I worked on the flight deck for a week as a plane captain and a chain bearer. Plane captain is someone who prepares the aircraft for flight, straps a pilot in it, starts it up, runs all the flight controls, and then turns it over to the other shirt to be taxied out. He is also the one who carries about 100 pounds of chains around him. So every time the aircraft stops, they can tie it down.
Wow.
I enjoyed this immensely because it was a fast-paced environment. But the second week, they needed to bring somebody else to get some experience, so I got to work in the scullery. If you don't know what the scullery is, that's in the galley. And it's not serving food, it's scrubbing pots and pans. So that was not so much fun. But after we returned from that active duty, did a few more drills, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. So I had an opportunity, and I requested to be placed on active duty. My wish was granted, and in December 1971, I was transferred to Naval Air Station Alameda in California, where I served in an anti-submarine squadron for 3 years. But my duty went on from that, and I served around the country in many different squadrons. But one of the most important things you discover while serving in the Navy is the people, or any armed forces. It's the people that you meet, the people that you deal with. When people ask me, do I miss the Navy after retirement? I almost always say no, but I certainly miss the people. You work with these people very close, in close quarters, in stressful situations, and you can always count on them to lift you up and have your back. And yes, to play practical jokes. We had an AZ. Now, an AZ is someone who takes care of the log books and types up naval messages that go out to tell what your status is and what is going on. And of course, this was before we had computers. So we had electric typewriters. Well, in this one squadron, I was the supply chief. And the AZ was on the other wall, on the other side of the wall from me. And his typewriter was against the wall. And so, being a little devious, my crew and I one night went in, drilled a small hole in the bulkhead, ran a tube up into his typewriter. And at that time, you could smoke in the spaces. So we knew he was going to be typing the morning report for aircraft status. So he would get in there and he would go, da-da-da-da-da-da, start typing. We'd blow smoke. We'd come up into the typewriter, he would stop. He would start again. Smoke would go. On back and forth, back and forth. So we started giggling a little bit, and he'd come around the wall, and we were caught. Well, we all had a great laugh, and he said something about our mothers. But you know, I served with a guy that was a great practical joker. And he was a great guy, and I'm thankful for him for continually pestering me to ask Linda out.
Oh, yes.
And so I did ask her out, and that went on, and 26, almost 27 years later, we're still having fun. But like I said, this guy was a practical joker, continued always to do practical jokes. So he worked for me as my supply chief, and he went on 2 weeks leave. And so he had a habit. Every morning he came in, he would look at the papers on his desk, open his right-hand drawer, and take out his coffee cup. So we knew when he was coming back, so we went in there and opened the drawer and emptied it out, put a plastic bag inside and lined it real nice and watertight, filled it with water, and put about 10 goldfish in there. Shut the door. He came in the next morning. You know, we were ready. We were just so happy to see this happen. Looked at his desk. After 2 weeks of stuff on his desk, reached over, opened the drawer, saw the fish, closed the drawer, said something about our mothers, and said, "Where's my coffee cup and who's feeding these fish?" I'm often asked about women in the Navy. I can tell you this, while assigned to sea duty, during my time, women were not allowed in those squadrons. They were not allowed to serve aboard ships or in seagoing squadrons. But we did have women in our commands. And in one such command was an aggressor squadron, so we were land-based. We did not go to the ship. 1/3 of that squadron was women. This is my first experience with women.
Uh-oh.
And I was in charge.
Or so you thought. Okay.
I did have one young lady tell me I was the meanest SOB she'd ever met. But we won't go there. But they performed the same duties as their male counterparts, and they did it quite well. I had an all-female jet engine change crew. Now, changing a jet engine is not an easy thing on an aircraft, especially on the 84s that we had. You had to remove the tail from the aircraft. Then you pull the motor out. Then you inspected the bay, put the motor back in, drug it down to high power, did the aircraft turn, make sure everything was within limits, brought it back, put the tail back on it. And what was fun to watch is as they torqued the bolts that held the tail on, they have to use a 4-foot torque wrench. And you could see them as they were reaching and pulling down and getting close to where it would snap, and it would be in a torque that would shake and shake and shake and shake and finally would snap. But they accomplished that every time. And the only difference I ever found between females and males in the Navy was males were all over the spectrum. They were good, they were bad, they were mediocre. He was pretty good, he was okay. Women only had two places. They were exceptional or the worst you'd ever seen in your life. Nothing in between. Most were exceptional. Females now serve aboard ships, Navy-owned submarines, and are in squadrons. They have come a long way since the first woman who was not a nurse was enlisted in the Navy in 1917. This woman was also the first Navy chief. And she passed away at the young age of 29. During my time in the Navy, I was an aircraft mechanic, a quality control inspector, a division chief, a supply chief, a maintenance control chief, a maintenance chief, an air wing maintenance coordinator, and a command master chief. What does all that mean? I was a wrench turner, an inspector of the wrench turners, in charge of the division of wrench turners, and directed all the maintenance performed by the wrench turners. And responsible for all maintenance performed in programs pertaining to that of the wrench turners. And in the air wing, I directed and coordinated the maintenance of 7 squadrons, and we performed inspections on them and for compliance with all written directing and maintenance instructions. And finally, as command master chief, oversaw all personnel programs and was an advisor to the commanding officer on all morale issues. And the master chief acronym for that is MCPO, which stands for Master Coffee Pot Operator. It was during my time as maintenance chief of an aggressor squadron that I was up for orders. I had contacted my detailer, and that's the guy who gives you orders on my options of commands that I could transfer to. He told me he had to check and see what my options were to get back to me, which normally meant you were screwed. We had just gone through a major inspection, was being briefed on the results by the carrier air wing maintenance officer and the maintenance master chief. My detailer had a call while we were in the middle of this brief, and the master chief said, "Take that call." So I asked him, and he said, "I got your 3 options." I said, "Okay, great, what are my 3 options?" And I'm looking at the master chief over there, and the guy goes, You can go to VF 301, it's okay. Or you can go to VF 301. Or you can go to VF 301. And at that time, that squadron was not known for their maintenance being very good. And so as you can tell, I was delighted. Not so much. Just remember, this will come back up and there'll be a test. About the title of this message, A Brown Shoes Reflection. This refers to the brown shoes worn by the officers and chiefs in the aviation field in the Navy. Surface ship sailors wear black shoes, hence the term black shoe and brown shoe Navy. The brown shoes came about during Naval Aviators training in San Diego in 1913. They were coming off surface ships and wore low quarter, square-toed, black rough-out leather shoes, which served best on the coal-burning ships commonly consumed soot from the ship's stacks. By the way, Jim told me to say this, sailors go to sea in ships, not boats. During training, they found that the dusty environment caused them to constantly be cleaning their shoes and difficult to keep them in the condition they needed to be. After discussing this with seniors and finally coming up with brown high-top boots with leggings, which they had made at their own expense, these boots and leggings became part of the Naval Aviators uniform on November the 13th, 1913. And would continue to be part of the uniform until July the 1st, 1976. And that was during the period of the Chief of Naval Operations, Zumwalt. Some remember Zumwalt. He changed the Navy radically by allowing facial hair, beards, handlebar mustaches. But he also was a surface sailor, and he did not like brown shoes. So he took those away from the aviation people. But after many years of not having brown shoes, aviators kept petitioning the Secretary of the Navy to allow them to go back to brown shoes. And finally, in 1985, brown shoes were returned to the naval aviators and the chief petty officers in the aviation rank. And it has been a significant morale boosting thing for those people in those. And I wore those brown shoes proudly, and that's part of the reflection. One last story. You remember I said there'd be a test. It's a story about manifestation before I knew about manifestation. Like I said, I was transferred to VF 301 in October of 1989 and was assigned as the maintenance control chief, which oversaw the maintenance, direction of the maintenance within the squadron. As I'd been there a very short period of time, we were due to have a major inspection. The commanding officer came to me as being one of the newer people in the squadron and asked me the question, how do you think we're going to do on this inspection? And me never being one to mince words, I told him, you're going to fail and you'll be lucky if you keep your job.
Wow.
And he asked me, he goes, why do you say that? We have a good squadron. And I said, Skipper, your people look like crap. Your spaces look like crap. And your aircraft are the poorest maintained in the fleet. And he looked at me and says, that can't be true. And I said, Skipper, it is. We went on, we had our inspection, and we failed miserably. He was able to keep his job, but some people did lose theirs. After that inspection, he had me moved from the maintenance control to the maintenance chief to oversee all of the maintenance. Now I had a maintenance officer and a maintenance material control officer that I worked for. Pretty much gave me a free hand. But we changed the attitude of the squadron by instilling good personal military appearance, cleaning the spaces, and doing the proper maintenance on the aircraft. So when they came back and we did the inspection, we passed the flying colors. And about a year later, while still on the same tour, we were preparing to go to Fallon, Nevada for air combat training with our Air Wing. And it's significant that we took all our reservists so that we'd be going, it would be about 65 aircraft and about 1,500 personnel there total. And we were in the midst of receiving and transferring aircraft. The transferring of aircraft is not that difficult, but the receiving of aircraft, especially in the fighter community or in a community that has ejection seats, takes a period of time. Once you receive the aircraft, you inventory it, you pull the ejection seats out, send all the parachutes, all the cartridges, they have to be examined. The aircraft has to be jacked up. The emergency and operational assistance of the landing gear have to be checked. The flight controls all have to be checked. The seats put back in. Then the aircraft's flown for a check flight. Plus, it being painted with squadron markings and colors. So this all took time. And as I said, we were preparing to go on a major detachment. Each morning and each evening we had a maintenance meeting with all the supervisors and division chiefs. And since we were on half days, that's 12-hour shifts. I was able to talk to each group twice, every day. And every morning I walked in and I would tell them, gentlemen, we're taking 10 aircraft to Fallon. Most had a look of astonishment and doubt. And I would answer that, I would say it again, and we only had 8 aircraft on board, how are we going to take 10? We continued this every day and every night. Continue to tell them we're taking 10 aircraft to Fallon. They continue to do their work. We had my PRs, who were the parachute riggers. All of a sudden they said, can we make new intake covers for the aircraft? The intake covers are what you put over the intakes at night to protect from FOD or foreign objects getting inside the intakes so you don't ruin an engine. So they manufactured all new intake covers. This they did on their own time, not during work. My corrosion team, those are guys that paint the aircraft and do the maintenance, do the corrosion checks on the aircraft. They would work weekends while maybe we were off to get these aircraft prepared. And about a week before the detachment was to go, we still had about 9 aircraft up. We had 3 aircraft we were working on. Myself and a small detachment left and went to Fallon to prepare the spaces, the flight line, and berthing for all the people, and to get ordnance checked out so we could be ready to drop weapons and so forth when they arrived. While we were there, I was out walking the flight line, and I heard 2 of my ordnancemen, the guys that load the bombs and the missiles, and they were talking with sister squadron ordnance, and were saying that we were going to have 10 aircraft on deck. Well, our sister squadron, they were in the same hangar with us, so they knew what we were going through, and they were not going to commence that until after the detachment. And so they said, no way. And I heard one of the ordnancemen, I will bet you, and they put a significant amount of money on it, I'm not going to say what it was, that we have 10 aircraft here. And they said, you're wrong. So the morning of the fly-in came. And early that morning, 2 of our jets came over the field, broke, came in and landed, so we had 2 on deck. About 11 o'clock, we had a flight of 7 that flew over the field, broke, and landed. 9 on deck. Day wore on, the day wore on, getting late in the evening. And I'd say evening, it was afternoon. And about this time, here came an aircraft that did a high-speed, low-altitude flyby. Number 10. The ordnanceman cheered. The other ordnanceman from the other squadron, not so much. People, any including the commanding officer, told me that it was not possible this could be done. And I continued to tell him it was. The people of the squadron, the people that worked, knew that it could be done. They had convinced themselves that it could be done.
Yes.
But with human spirit, with a little help from above, and very hard work, it shows what can be manifested. And I have one request. When you go home today, when you say your prayers, I ask that you think about those men and women that are serving today and give them a prayer.
Yes.